another steamship is heading down the Nile River towards Cairo. However, on this steamship, piles of wooden crates hold the mummified remains of ancient Egypt's most powerful rulers: Ramses the Great, Seti I, Thutmose III, and dozens more. Locals from the Nile Valley have gathered along the riverbanks to watch their ancient kings be transferred. Women wail and tear their hair. Men fire rifles into the sky. They're performing the ancient rites of mourning for their dead. These pharaohs were not coming home. They were leaving, ripped from their resting place of 3 millennia and transported under foreign authority to a museum in Cairo, a city many of these rulers wouldn't have even visited in their time. The men who ordered their removal did not consult the people on those riverbanks, or concede to the funerary practices or wishes of the dead. They did not need to. They had power, and that was enough. Who owns the ancient world? The story of DB320, the Jer el-Bahri royal cache, forces us to confront that question head-on. The discovery and handling of DB320 is not simply one of archaeology's greatest finds and arguably biggest blunders. It is a lens through which we can examine a deep tension between Egyptian communities, colonial European powers, and the modern Egyptian state over who has the right to claim, learn from, and profit from ancient history. This is not just a story from 1881, but one from ancient times that is still being written today. To figure out how those mummies got on that boat, we have to go back around 3,000 years. The New Kingdom was coming apart by 1070 BCE. Centralized royal power was slipping, and the high priest of Amun at Thebes, modern Luxor, rose to fill the void. Due to the weakened political authority, the tombs at the Valley of the Kings became more common targets for looting. The high priest of Amun saw that the tombs of the pharaohs were being robbed and made a remarkable decision. They collected the mummies of over 50 pharaohs, rewrapped and relabeled them, and then moved the pharaohs to a new secret tomb, trying to protect and preserve the bodies. The tomb they chose was cut deep in the limestone cliffs at Jer el-Bahri, on the west bank of the Nile, and thus the royal cache was born. As far as we know, DB320 remained largely undisturbed after the priests of Amun moved the bodies of the pharaohs until sometime around 1871, when a member of the local Abd el-Rasul family happened upon its entrance. This man did not report the discovery, and instead made a calculated decision. For nearly a decade, they quietly sold artifacts: shabbats, papyrus fragments, amulets, funerary objects, from the tomb on the antiquities market, feeding them slowly into circulation to avoid detection. But Egyptologists eventually caught on. Gaston Maspero, the French director of the Egyptian Antiquity Service, began seeing an unusual amount of exceptional quality royal burial objects appearing in Luxor and Cairo markets with no known source. He launched a formal investigation, and eventually, under circumstances that included coercion and, according to some accounts, physical pressure, a member of the Abd el-Rasul family revealed the location of the cache. It's worth pausing here. In most media, the Abd el-Rasuls are cast as the villains of this story: criminals, looters, grave robbers. But looking at the situation from another angle, who gave the Colonial Antiquities Service, an institution staffed and directed primarily by European nationals, the authority to decide what Egyptians could or could not do with objects found beneath their own soil? The answer is not archaeology. The answer is power, and that distinction matters. On July 5, 1881, Emile Brucht, Maspero's assistant, descended into the DB320 tomb. He later described being overwhelmed by astonishment. Lining the corridor were coffins bearing the most celebrated names in Egyptian history. Brucht's response was immediate, but scientifically catastrophic. He ordered the entire cache be emptied in under 48 hours. Hundreds of local workers were hired to haul artifacts up from the tomb towards the Nile. Coffins were dragged across rough terrain. Objects were removed without systematic documentation. Almost no photographs were taken of the original arrangement. The spatial context and the significance behind it was lost forever. This was colonial archaeology being driven by the idea that possession mattered more than understanding. The mummies were shipped to the Bulaq Museum in Cairo, cataloged by Western scholars, and absorbed into a system of knowledge that treated Egyptian antiquity as raw material for European science. And so we return to that moment on the Nile. The steamships, people lining the riverbanks, crying and firing their guns. What did that scene mean? Were they mourning the pharaohs themselves? The loss of their history? Foreign claims to their land? Were they protesting or celebrating in the only way available to them? Whatever the interpretation, their presence is a reminder that the people of Egypt did not forget their past. They knew what Europe's foreign ideologies couldn't. Their history and identity were inseparable. Conflicts over ownership of ancient artifacts started long before the discovery of the royal cache and have continued into the present. Famously, the Egyptian government has been unsuccessfully pushing for the return of the Rosetta Stone from the British Museum since 2003. The move for repatriation of artifacts is a complicated one, with very inconsistent results. Much of the world built their collections of Egyptian artifacts during eras of colonial power in Egypt, and now face mounting pressure to return what was taken. One powerful scene of ownership came in April 2021, where Egypt staged the Pharaoh's Golden Parade. 22 royal mummies, many of which were found in the DB320 cache, were driven from the Egyptian Museum through the streets of Cairo to the new Nemek Museum. This was a performance clearly designed so the millions of people around the world would understand. Egypt has reclaimed its pharaohs. However, even the movement of these artifacts within Egypt is complicated. Those mummies did not come from Cairo. They came from the cliffs of Deir el-Bahari in Thebes. Let me ask, if you find a helmet from the Revolutionary War in your backyard, are you obligated to give it to the US government? Ancient Egypt had strict funerary practices that enabled their dead to reach the afterlife peacefully. They never asked to be pulled from their tombs, not once but twice. Should the people of Luxor have claim over the mummies found on their land? Should the Abd el-Rasul family be heroes for their discovery, or villains? That might depend on your own personal values. But the ones that will make the final call, as always, will be the ones with power and something to gain. DB320 is not simply a chapter in the history of Egyptology. It is a mirror held up to any society that has ever asked, who does the past belong to? From the priests of Amun, who first concealed the kings, to the colonial administrations who removed them, to the modern Egyptian state that now displays them in the Nemek Museum. Every act of claiming these mummies has also been an act of power. Each generation has said, in their own way, these are ours. The past often does not speak for itself. It's spoken for, by those with the authority, the resources, the platform to make their voice heard. DB320 pushes us to think critically about whose voices have shaped our understanding of ancient Egypt, and if that perspective is correct or just the only available option. A question that just gets more and more confusing in our modern world.